A minute.
I call the Honourable Member Raymond Ho Nihauma.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. There's no problem for me to take this call to support this bill. I do agree to what the Minister and the earlier speakers have said in their earlier contributions, that this bill is seeking to strike a balance between public safety and costs to be incurred to those individual or corporate owners. The bill is designed to improve our legislative system for managing earthquake-prone buildings. But, Mr. Speaker, there are several issues that we must address in order to enact a piece of legislation that has the scope and flexibility to deal with the diversity of this type of building stock and the problems it presents. Before I start, I'd like to thank the submitters who raised valid points during the review of the earthquake-prone building policy. The Canterbury Earthquake Royal Commission and the stakeholders, professionals, experts that I have spoken to, particularly the structure engineer, Mr. John Scarry. The first issue is what level of strengthening is required. Under Section 122 of the primary legislation, namely the Building Act 2004, a building with a seismic performance strength that is less than 33% of the design standards is defined as earthquake-prone building. It is also known as the so-called one-third rule. The Christchurch City Council had earlier expressed in its submissions on other bills a view that the test should stay the same for the next 5 years, while the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Act 2011 is in force and the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority, or SERA, exercise powers under that act. In the Canterbury region, the seismic loading factor changed in May 2011, and more buildings will now be classed as earthquake-prone without any change to the 33% test. For example, a building that had a strength of 34% in 2009 that is undamaged and in exactly the same condition in 2012 as in 2009 is estimated to have a strength of only 25% of the 2012 code requirements. This bill requires that once a building is classed as earthquake-prone, it needs to be strengthened to be marginally above 34% MBS or new building standard to no longer be earthquake-prone. But the performance of unreinforced masonry buildings in the Christchurch earthquakes shows that, particularly in earthquakes with a long duration of intense shaking, even buildings strengthened to 50% MBS are likely to suffer heavy or major damage or be destroyed. Therefore, what is expected to be gained in a major earthquake if the level of strengthening required is only just above 34%? Mr. Speaker, the Building Act 2004 provides a more realistic treatment of earthquake-prone buildings. The one-third new building standard cutoff was used then as a means of identifying the most at-risk buildings, and it was then up to the local authorities to determine what level of strengthening was to be required. Wellington City Council, for instance, the current policy on earthquake-prone buildings states that the council wants strengthening to at least 67% MBS, and any strengthening lesser than that will not prevent the council demanding further strengthening in future should the council get the power to do so. Having said that, we now have two identical but different terms to identify, to define the buildings in question. One is earthquake-prone buildings, and the other is at-risk buildings. Because the 4th September 2010 earthquake, we can learn a huge lesson from that, because it is still a fact that over 70% of the fatalities on 22nd February 2011 earthquake were caused not by the collapse of earthquake-prone buildings, but by the collapse of two earthquake at-risk buildings. For instance, the CDV building and the PGC building rated later to be at 40% and 50% MBS respectively. The very large modern Grand Chancellor was only seconds away from collapse. So from those examples, we can see that this bill does nothing to require earthquake risk buildings, that is, those rated at between 34% and 67% MBS, but containing critical vulnerabilities to be strengthened at all. Therefore, any claims that this bill is about life safety in extreme seismic events is to some extent misguided. Mr. Speaker, on the other side of the coin is with regard to the social, economic and environment impact this bill may have on the building owners. A survey by Wellington City Council last year indicated that around half of the earthquake-prone building owners had difficulty getting insurance, and many faced premium increases of more than 50%. We do not want to see businesses go belly up, nor do we want to see community character and heritage interests overlooked. Submitters at the stage of the review of the policy were also eager to communicate that a lack of insurance impacts on a building owner's ability to obtain a loan in order to pay for the strengthening work to be done. And this process, Mr. Speaker, sadly, can be a costly chicken and egg situation. Concerns from submitters such as the New Zealand Heritage Trust Board noted that while many heritage buildings are privately owned, these places are often of value to society as a whole, yet private owners are shouldering these costs single-handedly. I urge the affected parties, stakeholders, to make their submission to the committee and to have their voice and concerns heard. And one idea that has been floated among affected parties and concerned parties is about tax concession and subsidies. With regards to the government scheme to contribute 25% to leaky building repairs, it was widely stated that this could have cost the government $1 billion if there have been full take-up. But according to some experts, and this point has been addressed by New Zealand First MP Mr. Andrew Williams earlier, that by the time GST and direct PAYE and company profit tax were considered, the actual cost to the government was minimal. So whether it's a good idea for us to deliberate with regard to tax concession and subsidies, I think the affected parties and concerned parties should seriously consider this option and make their view known to the committee. Because, as I said, this is kind of a chicken and egg situation, and many private owners or corporate owners probably in this situation may have the similar problems as well, to have issues with insurance companies, and then they have issues with their banks as well. So, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, to conclude, we have no problem to support this bill at this stage, but we urge the affected and concerned parties to make submissions to the committee and to make their voice heard. Thank you.
I call the honourable member Maggie Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.